Archer and Emily Murdoch. Ladies, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Hi.
And we are all over the place this week. Alyssa's in Mauritius, Emily's in the UK, and Kate is on the East Coast with me. So at least there are two of us on that side, north and south. So, well, we had four releases this week. We had the three books with the ladies that are talking to us today, and then we also had the Tales of Timeless Romance anthology. So I'll make sure I pop all the links for all the books in the comments so you can grab them at the end. But in the meantime, I was hoping that Kate could tell us about her book, which is the second book in a very fine metal. It's Be Daring Duke, and these sound like so much fun. It's like every time I get a blurb, it makes me giggle because I can just imagine these women driving these poor men to distraction. So can you tell us about your story, Kate?
Yeah, so this is the first series that I've written about a family. So it's 5 sisters and an older brother. And they sort of live under this mass delusion because they've been brought up by this aunt who has no sense at all. So they've developed these ideas about romance that are absolutely incorrect. And they also never know what they're bad at because they're all so supportive of each other. Mm-hmm. So one of them considers herself a very accomplished poet. She's terrible. Another one likes to do a scene from Othello. She is also terrible. So they're all like really bad at things, but they don't know it. So they're like full of confidence and they're going out to find their man, but they have very high standards. So each guy has to meet this particular standard. So in book 2, Rosalind has decided her primary requirement is courageousness. And it's not going to be enough to just hear about it. He has to prove it to her, rescue her from something. And it all sounds like a great plan, except for there's nothing to rescue her from. So she has to start providing him opportunities to step in, so she hires a pickpocket and she does all this stuff. And then she eventually gets herself into some real trouble. And so the Duke's got to figure it out. He's got to rescue her.
I love the idea of her losing her sense of self-preservation on the hopes that he will step up and fix things for her.
But they're also oblivious. But, towards the end, they all do gain a little bit of maturity, sort of see where they might have gone wrong. So hopefully they grow up a little bit, being exposed to the actual world instead of this weird world they've created for themselves.
They get to hang on to the weird world enough for the fun parts.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that sounds like great fun. And we have 3 more books in this series.
Yeah, it'll be 6. So there's 4 more. Yeah. Because the older brother will be the last one to fall.
Oh, wonderful. Well, it sounds like so much fun, and I love the idea of heroines that set tasks for their heroes. Be nice if they didn't kill them in the prospect, but
Yeah, they come close. I mean, yeah.
Awesome. Well, the next book we have releasing this week is Alyssa's book, and it is The Baron and the Lady Chemist, and it's the second book in the Grantham Girls series. And I'm really interested in this one because of the silk process. Can you tell us about the book and then also about turning silk gold and silver?
Yes, no, I will. So I also have a family series, 3 sisters. And they're all interested in science. So the first one likes horticulture. That was the Duke and Lady Gardener. The second one is interested in chemistry. And the third one in astronomy. So they have a scientific bent. And they're quite intellectual, but the first and the third sister, they're more similar. And the middle one's more introverted. But I guess you have to be if you're going to be doing chemistry experiments on your own all the time. And so then she has this very interesting process. She goes and she reads a text that was written in 1790 by Elizabeth Fulham. And she was a woman scientist who did loads of experiments using metal salts and staining silk metallic colors like gold and silver. And so what's very interesting in the Regency period, you couldn't actually get that kind of color, that the dyes weren't metallic. So she decides to make her own silk shawls for the London season. And she does this, secretly, because her grandmother doesn't want people to know that she makes her own shawls. She doesn't want her to seem like an oddity to everybody. And also, she's interested in science, and she just wants her to not seem too different during her season. So she makes the most beautiful shawls and then embroiders them. And then she meets the hero, who actually has an interest in a silk mill. And he's very suspicious because he thinks it's smuggled silk, because there's a huge problem with silk smuggling at this time, and during the Georgian period and then into the Regency period. And it was actually banned. So it was contraband silk, and they used to bring it in, and then authorities were always trying to catch people who had brought it in illicitly. Yeah, so then my heroine actually gets caught up in danger because people think she's a silk smuggler. So it's very interesting, because I brought in all these threads that were actually historically accurate. And it was very interesting to learn about the actual staining process. And I'm not a chemist, so it kind of hurt my brain. I felt trying to figure it out, but I did in the end. And the story was very interesting to write.
It's just such a lovely idea, the idea of taking fabric and changing it, and then her getting kind of called out because it couldn't possibly have been made here. It's like,
yes,
and what better?
They thought the English silk wasn't of the same standard as the French or Italian silk. And so it's quite a cutthroat industry. And the silk industry had gone into decline in England because they had standardized all the wages. So people were forced to pay wages that were too high, and it actually caused a big problem in the silk industry. So actually just reading the history of both the silk and the chemistry processes, it all just seemed to gel very nicely into this plot.
And what better hero than somebody who just inherited silk?
Yes, exactly. And
it's almost like that was made to be.
Yes, they were completely. It was like they complemented each other. Yeah. So very interesting book to write.
Yeah, well, it sounds great, and it sounds fascinating. And then there's one more book in that series, and that's with the third sister.
Yes, the Lady Astronomer. Awesome. Yeah, so she's quite fun, and I just finished writing that book, and it was quite a fun book. I tend to veer between quite a bit more serious plots, and then like really light-hearted ones. And I think once I veer from the more serious to the light-hearted because I get tired of being serious, and then so I swing between the two. Yeah,
there has to be a way to keep yourself in the game too. So. And your books are in the Sweet Dream line, along with Kate's books are Sweet Dream as well.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
And Emily is the spicy, fiery one.
Yes. If you're looking for sweet, my books are cute, but they do have love-making scenes in them. So yeah, just FYI for people who are looking for a particular thing, I might not be the flavor of spice you're looking for, or I might be, in which case come along. I got tons of books.
I love that we can label them that way because I love that you can pick the heat level that you want to read at,
Yeah, well, if I go out for food and I've got different spices of curries, I want to be able to get the spice that suits my palate. And sometimes you want something really fiery, and sometimes you think, no, something really creamy and rich and delicious and filling and satisfying. That will do me quite well.
Yeah. So your book is Every Duke Has His Price, and it's book 5 in the Dukes in Danger series. And these are dukes with too much time in their hand.
This is what happens when you leave rich men alone, and they just get bored and they go looking for trouble. So if you haven't encountered my Dukes in Danger series, yes, Evan's completely right. These are stories of dukes who nothing's really expected of them. They're not meant to be clever. They're not meant to be charming. They're just meant to be dukes and sire heirs and just get on with it. And unfortunately, my heroes are a lot more interesting and a lot cleverer than that, a lot braver, and have no sense of danger whatsoever. So in this book, it's not a direct continuation. You can read this series in any order. But my heroine in this book, Beth, you actually meet her sister in the previous book. So there's a little bit of a connection, but you can read them whichever way around you want. So essentially I have Hugh Chaudelet is the Duke of Murdoch, and he's very much this kind of scoundrel duke. He's gone to France for adventure because there's a war on. He wants to drink, he wants to gamble, and he's run out of money because he's not as clever at gambling as he thinks he is. He thinks he's very impressive. But unfortunately, he is now penniless and stuck, and he's desperate to get back, but he's got no money to pay his passage. Enter Beth, who is absolutely desperately seeking her brother, who's gone missing in the war. She knows that it's absolutely outrageous that she's there, and she doesn't really care. She's never been one for society's expectations. But as you can imagine, a woman traveling France on her own is getting a little bit hairy. And there's this encounter one night at an inn, and he rescues her from what may be a rather tricky situation. And they strike a bargain. He will help Beth find her missing brother, and then Beth will pay Hugh's passage back to London. Unfortunately, both of them are kind of lying, and both of them are kind of telling the truth.
So he just volunteered to be a kept man. I like this turn.
I mean, there's a lot going on there, and unfortunately there's a lot of secrets, there's a lot of lies, there's lots of expectations, and they very quickly discover that if they want to put themselves first, they may just have to betray the other. I know.
Those are the heart ripper ones, the ones where you can see the only way this is going to happen is if they both go just, you know.
And I think what I really loved about writing this book is that there's lots of different directions you could take it in just on the tone. So this could be a really dark, military, gory, visceral story. It is not that. It's very much my kind of joyful, witty, ridiculous, misunderstandings out the wazoo. But there are these moments of real honesty and real openness and real vulnerability, mostly between my hero and heroine. But they encounter things in France that are shocking. They are still searching for her brother. They don't know what's happened to him. That he's been missing for a little while, and so there's this kind of underlay of seriousness amongst the joy. I think one of the easiest ways to do that was to do a Grumpy Sunshine, and so I absolutely have a Grumpy Sunshine. So if you're looking for Grumpy Sunshine, this is the place to find it.
Which leads us ever so nicely into the conversation I wanted to have after we talked about the
almost like we planned it.
Almost like I gave you a heads up ahead of time. But I didn't tell you Grumpy Sunshine is my favorite. It is oh my goodness, it's my absolute favorite.
So should we unpack what that means for anyone who's listening and going, I have no idea?
Yes.
That
yes.
is.
So we're going to talk about favorite tropes, and we're also going to talk a little bit about Jane Austen and the mother of everything, and writing fan fiction. But to do tropes first. So what is Grumpy Sunshine to you?
Grumpy Sunshine to me is when the romantic couple, and it can be either way around, kind of gender expression wise. One person is super grumpy, super negative. It's always the end of the world. There's never any joy to be found in everything. And the other person is like super bubbly, super cheerful, always the bright side of life. And they both love and hate those things about each other. So the Sunshine's always like, why can't you be happy? Why can't you be joyful? But they also appreciate, like, they have maybe a more realistic view of the world. And then the Grump is like, oh my gosh, you're so naive. You have no idea what the real world is like. But also you're bringing sunshine into my life and I kind of love you. Oh no.
It's so much more fun to do it your way.
Yeah. Oh, I love Grumpy Sunshine.
Yeah, no, I love that one, and I love the pragmatist and the optimist kind of nature of it. The twisting the flavor so you see things predominantly one way or predominantly another way. I think it's so much fun. Yeah. Alissa, what's your favorite trope to read or write?
I quite like the enemies to lovers trope because of Pride and Prejudice. I think that was the first romance I ever read when I was 10 years old. And then I also like the blue stocking kind of vibe. Because the second book was Sylvester by Georgia Taylor. So so those are the two that I like.
So enemies to lovers, I think is easy for everybody to understand because it is exactly what it says it is. Sometimes with mistaken perceptions of a person, which is kind of the foundation of Pride and Prejudice. What is blue stocking?
Well, the academic heroine often, well, for me, I write quite a few blue stocking heroines.
I would never have guessed that from your books.
Yes. Yeah, so, and I think that was when I read Sylvester, because she was a novelist. Well, she did write kind of a crazy story. It wasn't necessarily a blue stocking kind of story. If you read Sylvester with Phoebe, but she was still a writer. So I think I always gravitate to those kind of books because I like to have something else beside the romance to kind of research. Because then, interesting subjects, and then trying to make them interesting to other people. Well, that's my personal taste, is to read more than just a romance in a romance. But that's why I like to research these different subjects.
Yeah, I like that too. I like when I get to learn things, especially how
Yeah.
things are done. I think that's one of the joys of historical, is getting to learn how things were put together, or how things are made, or how things are done, how societies are structured and things work and things. That's really interesting to me. And we talked a little bit about Pride and Prejudice and Enemies to Lovers. And I know, Kate, you said that was one of the ways that you started writing romance. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was saying that there is this whole very healthy subgenre of Pride and Prejudice variations or continuations. And I think the variations are probably the majority of those. And it's fascinating. If you crawl through what's out there, you can pretty much do anything as long as you keep the people who they were in Pride and Prejudice. So I wrote a bunch of them, but I saw some fascinating examples. One guy wrote one, it was a continuation, Darcy cheats, and Elizabeth kills her. Now, you can just imagine the reviews on this thing. And that was back when you could answer the reviews. So the guy was finding each person. It was absolutely fascinating.
Oh my goodness.
He was screaming at reviewers, I'm just trying to do something different. It's like, yeah, different, but the same, because it's a Pride and Prejudice variation.
Oh my God.
So there are ones with dragons in them. I mean, you can really do anything. And it was just so fascinating to start writing a book where you already know who everybody is. You could bring in new people, but you already know who everybody is. So what new situation are you going to put them in while still keeping the basic structure intact? So that's sort of how I got my feet wet writing romance.
I can't. I want the man who made Darcy cheat to have friends who would tell him that that's not a good idea.
Believe me, there were hundreds of people who told him that in reviews. Like, I mean, they were so upset that Darcy would cheat. Now Elizabeth's a murderer. Like, what just happened here? It was just fascinating. And I wondered, did the guy know and just think, I don't know, I'll get I'm
going to poke the bear anyway
or something. I don't know what it was, but it was so funny.
So I think one of the things, we talked a little bit about the difference of heat level and the ability to choose what you want as far as heat. And we've talked a little bit about trope expectations. And the idea, like the fundamental premise of romance is that, I'm sorry, my dogs are going to get interesting now, is that we make a promise to the reader. We make a promise to the reader that if they give us their time, they will get a happily ever after, or happy for now, some happy resolution with the couple together in some context at the end. And I'm wondering, when you talk about retellings or even derivative work, like I'm thinking of Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. Or what is it? Was it Pride and Prejudice and Zombies?
Yeah. And Sense and Sensibility and Sea Monsters.
Yeah. So when you talk about those kind of things, like wondering what it does to that reader's promise and that reader's expectations, and how you balance what is interesting and fascinating to you and what you want to write about with holding that.
I think covers is really important. I'm going to disappear for like 30 seconds. I can see the book. I'm just going to grab it. So this is the cover of Sense and Sensibility and Sea Monsters.
Oh yeah.
So I think that gives you an insight. I think the reader has a clue.
Yeah. But
Pretty
you also
early
knew
on.
because it's structured the way it would be, if it weren't a sea monster next to her. Yeah.
It's just your normal book.
Mhm.
And I think that's like the covers of our books give us so much information. I mean, like the flame, which is the very, very high heat end of Dragonblade, like you can tell by looking at it that it's a flame book. And then the sweeter you go along that line, like you can tell by looking at it. Like cover designers are such clever visual people; they are able to communicate so much. And I think some of the most disappointed I've been with books, not Dragonblade books, is where you pick it up and you're like, oh, this is going to be really sweet. Like I'm really in the mood for that. And you pick it up and you're like, whoa, don't let my mother see me reading this. Or vice versa. You're like, no, actually, I want something a bit spicy. And then you get to the end and you're like, they didn't even kiss? I'm sorry, what? So I think cover design for me is like the biggest promise.
Yeah, and we do some of the Sweet Dreams books have couples on them, but quite a lot of them just have a single woman, and I think that's a good visual clue too as to what the villain is.
I think that too. I think not having the man with the unbuttoned shirt on the front sort of communicates he's not going to unbutton his shirt until they're married.
Yeah. So we have so little time to give that information to the reader too. It's like you get the cover, and then if you catch them with the cover, you get the blurb, and then you get maybe half a page to see whether somebody's going to connect or not. Because I think our attention is also so scattered now.
And the tone of the blurb, I think, should give a hint. Yeah. Is this angsty? Is it light? Is it what is it?
Yeah. Yeah, trying to match everything to that reader's expectations. So how do you decide what you're writing next? I know, Alissa, you said you went back and forth between light and heavy. As a creative person, how do you figure out how to, and I know, Emily, you're incredibly structured in how you do things, and Kate, you have to be because of the way you set up your writing schedule. So how do you figure out what comes next, and how do you figure out how to keep yourself interested and engaged when, like as Emily said, you wrote this book quite a while ago?
I want to make myself laugh all day long. So I have tried in the past to write something sort of dark, serious, and it just evolves into, I can't do it. So now I know that, and that's always what I'm looking for.
What about you, Alissa?
Well, I have quite a random process of being creative. I tend to just look through interesting, the historical timelines, and I try and see what happened at certain times, and I base a lot of my work on real people. I research real lady chemists, for instance, lady geologists, and I go and, like a lady biologist I wrote about once. And then I find out, as much as I can about the actual woman's life and what she did. So base it really on historical facts as much as I can, and that gives me inspiration. So I'm very much about the history. I don't think I just generally come up with ideas without having a person in mind that actually lived often. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you want to learn about things ahead of time, and then the story comes out of the studying of the thing. Yeah, that makes sense.
Whereas I think, what two types of people would never want to be together? How can I make them be together? To the point where I'm starting to get, though, so far to ridiculous, it's swung back round to realistic. So in my Dukes in Danger series in book 2, I have a lady blacksmith, and it's considered absolutely ridiculous. And the hero's like, you can't be doing this. This is nonsense. What's going on here? And that book is 1811 or 1812. And I actually had a reader email me last week, and she was like, well, I had to email you because I've been doing my ancestry records, and I've discovered that my great times whatever grandmother was a blacksmith in 1851, and she was 70 years old. So she was 100% a working lady blacksmith in 1811. And I was like, shut the front door. What? And she was like, yep. And in the census, her daughter is the other blacksmith with her. So this is a matriarchal smithy. And I was like,
that's fantastic.
I could not have made that up if I tried.
Well, you did make that up.
But the idea that it was like, I sat there and I was like, God, that's ridiculous. We'd never have that in real life. And of course, unless you know where to look, historical records are so plentiful for the Regency period in some ways and so empty in others. And so you kind of trick yourself as a historian into thinking, well, I haven't seen it yet, so maybe it doesn't exist. There's no point to, why should I keep looking for it if it's not there? And then along comes someone else and is like, actually, in my census, in my family, here it is, actually, and it's real. I love that. History never stops surprising me.
And that's
And you would change as a
interesting
historian.
you said that because I just did like a written interview for Dragonblade where I said, I think we all get locked into what the rules and the norms were, and we forget that these were people, and there was lots of people who would say, yeah, I know what the norm is, and I'm not doing it anyway, and just do something completely different. So.
No, I completely agree.
It's true now, so there's no reason to believe that it wouldn't have been true all along.
Yep.
So, Emily, I know you were trained as a historian, and Alissa, you talked about going down rabbit holes of research. How do you all corral yourself in so that you don't spend all your time reading and no time writing?
Do you want to go first, Alissa? Because I'm going to have to think about that one.
Well, there's a certain time when you have to stop researching and start writing, otherwise you'll never start. So I often just try and understand, and then as I go, if there's something I don't understand, then I'll look it up as I go. So I try and get a general understanding and then research as I go, and I hope for the best. It's a very difficult thing in a way, because I often don't know what I'm going to write. I don't have that ability to plot a very detailed plot, so it's all very spontaneous. The things I find and I put them in the book, and then
Whereas I think I'm kind of, again, the opposite in that I have a very good top level to mid level knowledge of the Regency era, which is what I'm writing right now. And so I get my characters, I get my plot and my conflict, and then I just write. I just onto the page. And as I go, I'm making notes in a separate document, what is the fashion color of choice in this season, and what prints are going to be available here, and are we still ordering things from France? Is there an embargo? Can't remember. And so I have, at the end of it, I have a book and I have a bunch of really specific research questions. I think that sort of prevents me from going down I still end up in a Wikipedia hole of 20 minutes later going, how did I get here? Where have I? But I at least start with a really specific list of questions that I need to try and answer to plug back in as I go through edits.
Kate, do you get caught in research when you're writing?
Sometimes, but the only thing I don't ever want to do is do the same research twice. So I have an Excel file that is literally alphabetical, A, B, C, D, all the way to Z. And so whenever I pick up a piece of information, I put it in the Excel file. And then I have another Excel file that maps out all the times it would take to get places. By horse and carriage.
Oh, that's so good.
I can share that with you, actually.
Could you share that with me, please?
Sure.
The number of times I've gone London to York, right, York to London, London to York. And then 4 bits later, I'm like, London to York. What did I put down? What did I say?
Yeah, no, this one is really good. So oftentimes I'm thinking, 6 books ago, I know I looked into this whole thing, and I just go back to the Excel file, and then it all comes back to me. So
that's amazing that you have it, that you have the foresight to actually write it down and keep it somewhere where you can find it alphabetized is I think kind of fantastic.
Yeah, I don't want to do the same work twice. It's just
I have little folders with Word documents where I put every bit of research and the links, so that if I get asked where did that come from, I can locate it. So everything, but it's all Word, it's not Excel. But for each book, I have a load of
if you can put your hands on it, it counts.
Yeah, sure. I think that's my mistake, is that I'm very good at bookmarking things online. And of course, people take blogs down, they take articles down, websites go. So I'll be like, oh yeah, there was a brilliant article about bathing wear from the difference between 1810s, 1820s, and 1830s. And I was like, great. I was writing a story where someone was being mocked for being wearing old-fashioned swimwear in the 30s. I was like, well, I need to know what they're wearing in the 1810s. And I went back, and it was 404, and I was like, no, No, I need you. I need this. And it took me forever to find the equivalent information. So now I'm starting to get better at like, no, I need to write that down somewhere because if that website disappears.
Screenshots are the new bookmarks.
I mean.
True.
Well, ladies, it was lovely to talk to you today. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and I'm excited about all this week's books. There is something for everybody this week. So I will make sure I put the links in the comments. If you haven't got them yet, you want to grab them right away. Dragonblade books are the very best deal on pre-order and release. So don't wait. If you do wait because you get busy with something else, which happens to all of us, you can always read in Kindle with your Kindle Unlimited subscription. So. Thanks again for taking the time to be here. We will be back here at the same time next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you.